Welcome back to Montreal Connected. We're talking Montreal Canadiens this week with Sean Gordon and Arpin Basu, and inconsistent has been a word used to describe the Canadiens' performance. So I'd like to start by asking you two, who are the Montreal Canadiens? Are they November or are they January?
Well, I would.
They're April. They're April. They're none of the above. How about that? They're somewhere in the middle, I think.
Okay. I think they're trying to figure things out. I mean, I don't think they really know who they are, and they have this sort of internal battle going on as to, are we a speed team? Are we a grind? We keep hearing Michel Therrien mention them as being a grinding team, which is not what you would think they would be based on the players that they have and the players that they acquire. But I think they're still trying to map out their identity, and basically they're a team that has a really good goalie, and we don't really know what to expect from the other guys.
Well,
That's essentially
I actually think it's slightly nuts to say that they're a grinding team. I mean, if they looked at the guys that they have to win board battles and the guys that they have on the back end, if they grind, they're going to get ground, man. Like this is not anyhow. It's a bit odd to me. They're more or less the same team that they've been now for several years. They're in this sort of like slightly better than mediocre, but not really on the way to good. And I think that this is where we're at, right? And depending on when you catch them and when everyone's feeling good, they can beat Chicago convincingly. And otherwise, they can lose basically to Florida every time out. And it's one of those things where you're not really sure what you're going to get. And I think that that's something that's actually really hard to address.
Yeah, but they've beaten a lot of good teams in the league this season. They've beaten the Ducks. They're one of the few teams in the NHL to have beaten the Ducks. They've beaten the Blackhawks. They've beaten the Bruins, the Penguins. I mean, they've had some really good performances, and they show you the potential of what they can be. And then, as Sean said, they show you the potential of what they can be on the other end of the spectrum as well.
Worrisome is that last year, around the 40-game mark, albeit a shortened season, the Canadiens fell apart. And this year, as we saw last week, a risk of the same. Can you pinpoint what their biggest struggle is?
I just think that the margin for error is nil. Like they've got a blue line that's held together with like chewing gum and duct tape. They've got, without Alex Galchenyuk in the lineup, you've got a dimension that means that you don't have to defend the third line with a second or first or top pair. Yeah. It's one of those things where they can only lose one or two guys and it all falls apart. And I think that when your success is predicated on the fact that everyone has to have a good night at the same time, kind of tricky.
Well,
and I think
the point you mentioned about the third line is a good one, because they're built in the sense that to essentially guard against that needing everyone to have a good night, because they're supposed to have three lines that can score, and then the opposing coach won't know which one to defend and which one to put their top defenders against. So you figure one of those three lines on any given night could lead you offensively. That has not been the case. Right now it's David Desharnais' line is doing the offense, Thomas Plekanec's line is providing the defense, and the other two lines are expected to go out and break even. And so that's not the way the team is built. The team is supposed to have three lines that can go out and be dangerous and give the other coach a headache. And that hasn't been the case.
Let me ask you this then. Are you discouraged by the choices or the lack of choices that Marc Bergevin has made since being named GM?
I've thought about this, and yes and no. I think that there's a lot of people who are discouraged about the Daniel Briere signing. There's a lot of people who are discouraged about Douglas Murray and stuff, except that I think you need to look at it in the context of what they think they have. And they keep telling us, GM keeps telling us, the coach keeps telling us, we're a bubble team. Well, they're starting to think it, clearly. They're starting to play like it, clearly. And if that's the case, then you want Band-Aids. You don't want to go out and get players that you're going to need to sign to 3 or 4 year deals on the open market, knowing that this is all you've got. And I think they've got a bunch of prospects in the system that they clearly don't want to part with. And this is where we're at. So it's yet another transition year, and I don't really know where it goes.
But Daniel Briere was not the appropriate Band-Aid to choose. I mean, I understand that's a fair point that he did not want, and that's why he let Vincent Lecavalier sign with the Flyers, which was a shrewd move. Maybe not all general managers would do that, but Daniel Briere, Tuesday night against Carolina, Daniel Briere played fewer than 10 minutes. It was the 5th straight time he played fewer than 10 minutes that the Canadiens won. And so, I mean, that I think is very telling. Michel Therrien doesn't know how to use him, can't find appropriate line mates for him. Any line he's on lacks a certain identity. He's on with checkers. The checkers can't really do their job because he's very poor defensively. He's on a scoring line. He's not producing. He's gotten points in 2 of his last 20-odd games. So that was not the best signing. But I think overall he's not doing a horrible job.
Arpin, Sean, thank you so much for your insight. More Montreal Connected when we return after the break.